MMA October 13, 2017 300 p.m. EDT October 13, 2017 300 p.m. EDT Who's next up in the long pipeline of UFC talent? Use left or right buttons to navigate. Swipe left or right to navigate. Welcome to Generation Next, a new monthly feature that will spotlight the up-and-coming talent set to compete in the octagon in the month ahead. The thinking behind launching this series is to introduce fans to new additions to the roster and unsung competitors that deserve more attention before they cross the threshold into the UFC cage, so that once they start climbing the ladder and gaining traction, you're not playing catch-up to learn everything you need to know about everyone's favorite rising star. Put it this way, it's fun to be all in on Francis Ngannou today, but wouldn't it have been way more fun to have bought all kinds of stock in the Predator after he iced Luis Henrique in his promotional debut 2 years ago? That's what we hope to deliver here, a collection of potential contenders, championship hopefuls and entertaining fighters that we think will be fun to watch and to factor in their respective divisions over the next few years. Now that you know the origin story and the intentions, here is the first crop of fighters you should keep an eye on in the coming month. Here is Generation Next for October 2017. Getty Images. Last fight loss versus Demetrius Johnson at UFC 216. Look, just because he's in a championship fight and featured on the poster doesn't mean that borg isn't someone to pay attention to going forward. Think of him as the 2017 version of Kyoji Horiguchi, a guy with tremendous potential who is getting hustled into the cage with arguably the best fighter on the planet a little too early. The things to keep in mind with Borg are that he turned 24 in August, he's only got 7 UFC appearances and 13 fights under his belt, and he's only a couple fights into working with the crew at Jackson Wink MMA in his hometown of Albuquerque, New Mexico. As good as he is now, and he's very good, it's not hard to envision the Taz Mexican Devil continuing to improve and remaining in the championship picture for the foreseeable future. Getty Images. Next up, fights Cody Stamann at UFC 216. Considered the top prospect in the sport prior to making his promotional debut in April, the 24-year-old Fire Kid justified his advanced billing with a second-round knockout win over Patrick Williams that showed why so many people are hyped up about the French bantamweight. Already 5 years and 17 fights deep into his career, Duquesnoy has a very mature striking game and is a far more complete fighter than you might expect from someone his age who dominated on the regional circuit before arriving in the UFC. He too does his fight prep with a Jackson Wink crew in ABQ, so you know he's getting outstanding instruction and working with excellent training partners on a daily basis, two things that are crucial to the long-term success of a young fighter. Getty Images. Next up, fights Bobby Green at UFC 216. Rounding out the trio of talents from the Jackson Wink camp poised to make an impression on October 7th in Las Vegas is Venata, who you should already be familiar with given that he's earned post-fight bonuses in each of his 3 previous UFC appearances, including a Knockout of the Year contender at UFC 206 last December. But just in case you've been living under a rock and ignoring us young newcomers, here's the scoop on Groovy Lando, who got his nickname from Cub Swanson while dining together at an IHOP on a team that always has a lot of quality young talent kicking around. Venata has long been considered the best of the bunch, a creative and free-flowing fighter who is both a skilled, well-rounded martial artist and a gutsy, tough-as-nails talent with a tremendous amount of heart. Don't let his 12 mark in the UFC fool you. Venata is a legit lightweight prospect. Getty Images. Last fight loss to John Moraga at UFC 216. Unbeaten in 14 professional fights, Bibulatov could be on the fast track to title contention in the flyweight division, and his bout with the former title challenger and divisional litmus test Moraga will go a long way to determining how quickly the 29-year-old climbs the ladder. The undefeated Chechen upstart holds a win over UFC bantamweight Taylor Lapilus and bested Tuesday Night Contenders Series alum Donovan Frello to claim the WSOF flyweight title in his lone appearance under that banner, so it's not like Bibulatov has been beating scrubs during his perfect start. What remains to be seen, however, is how does against a more seasoned, more savvy opponent, which is why this bout with Moraga is worth watching and critically important. Getty Images. Next up, fights Donald Cerrone at UFC Fight Night 118. Till is the second fighter whose name is on the marquee this month, but hasn't gotten a ton of attention up to this point. Stepping into the cage with fan favorite Donald Cerrone in a main event assignment is sure to change all that right quick though. The 24-year-old Merseyside man has gone 301 in 4 UFC appearances, returning from a 19-month hiatus to earn unanimous decision wins over Jason Iri and Bojan Velikovic to re-establish himself as someone to track in the talent-rich welterweight division. But as with every up-and-coming fighter, the only way to get a real read on how good they might be is to see them in the cage with someone established. Enter Cowboy. This is exactly the type of matchup Till needs to prove he's capable of being a contender, as Cerrone is slick and ornery and won't take too kindly to the youngster trying to showboat at his expense. Outside of Borg, Till has the greatest opportunity to make a major splash with a win later this month in Gdansk, Poland. Getty Images next up fights Lena Landsberg at UFC Fight Night 118. One of the top prospects to enter the women's bantamweight division in some time, Lad was all set to make her UFC debut against Jessica I on the TUF 25 finale, but she was forced to withdraw on the morning of the event due to an illness. It's too bad because the fight with I was a perfect entry point for the 22-year-old Invicta FC standout, a chance to immediately establish a baseline for where Lad fits in the division and an opportunity to get a good win over a known talent. Instead, she'll head overseas to Poland to take on Landsberg, a durable, but far less experienced fighter best known in UFC circles for making it out of the first round against Chris Cyborg last September. Lad is a very tenacious grappler with a good top control who uses pressure to drown her opponents. She already holds a victory over former TUF finalist Amanda Bobby Cooper and beat current TUF hopeful Sahara Eubanks in her final appearance in the Invicta FC cage back in January. With a little more experience and refinement, Lad could establish herself as a contender. Getty Images next up fights John Lineker at UFC Fight Night 119. Honestly, I was never that high on Vera as a prospect because he struggled out of the gate in the UFC and seemed like he was destined to be another tough, but somewhat limited fighter who grinds out a career in the middle of his division. Over his last couple fights, however, Chito has changed my mind. Since joining forces with Team Oyama, the 24-year-old bantamweight has delivered a short-notice, come-from-behind finish of Brad Pickett in his retirement fight at home in London, no less, and a slick first-round submission win over Brian Kelleher in another fight where he was taking on the local guy. If he continues developing and improving at the rate he's shown over his last couple appearances, the Ecuadorian upstart could grow into being a Michael Chiesa, Dustin Poirier-type fighter in the 135-pound ranks. Getty Images next up versus Luan Chagas at UFC Fight Night 119. Price is someone you should already be paying attention to as he's earned 3 straight stoppages victories in the UFC, including first-round finishes of Brandon Thatch and Alan Jubin. Honestly, it's a little surprising that he's taking on Chagas and they're stationed on the preliminary portion of this card, but that has more to do with his opponent and the depth of Brazilian talent competing on the October 28 event from Sao Paulo. With good size, proven power and tremendous finishing instincts, Price has all the pieces to potentially make a run in the wide-open welterweight division. He was flawless in his win over Jubin, a tough, dangerous veteran, and showed a ton of moxie in his victory over Alex Morono, which was ruled a no contest after Price tested positive for marijuana after the fight. If he adds another impressive finish to his highlight reel here, don't be surprised if the hybrid gets hustled into a bigger matchup next time out. Getty Images next up fights Hakron Diaz at UFC Fight Night 119. A little older than most fighters that will land in this column going forward, the 29-year-old Gordon looked terrific in his UFC debut, stopping Michelle Quinones in the second round of the June Fight Night event in Oklahoma City. The Queens, New York native has only lost once in his career and cut his teeth fighting in CFFC, one of the top regional shows in the United States. What really makes Flash someone to watch, however, is his backstory, as the lightweight newcomer has struggled with addiction, which he discussed at length in a feature by Shaheen Al-Shati of MMAfighting.com. Gordon has the skills and resume to fight at the highest level, and a win over the well-regarded Diaz would move him to the fringes of the top 15 in the featherweight division. How far up the ladder he can climb is still to be determined, but Gordon is one to watch and someone to root for going forward.